I grew up in the film industry. I'm from Los Angeles. Both my parents are in the entertainment industry. My dad's name is John Milius. He's much more well-known and successful than I am, so I will list his accomplishments briefly. He wrote Apocalypse Now and directed Red Dawn and Conan the Barbarian and I don't know, a bunch of other stuff. He wrote Dirty Harry. Just everything that has like a conservative, pro-America bent to it, he probably did in some way. It was an interesting place to grow up, which is the center of Hollywood in Los Angeles, but with like the two most conservative people you've ever met. My mom is an actress, but like a champion sporting clays shooter and like a total hillbilly, and it was very, we call her the Bel Air gun mom, and she has like NRA stickers on her Porsche, and just like, it was very odd. But the thing that I really caught on to that I think was useful about that was that they both really taught me to stand up for what you believe in, even if it's extremely unpopular. And so I wasn't really swayed by my prep school or my university. I literally went to a communist university by accident, and I wasn't swayed by any of these politics because I wasn't a very good student and I didn't graduate. And then besides that, I also had some kind of integrity, I think. I don't know. But anyway, so movies. So I worked in the Trump administration, as my friend Will said, and I left year 3 to produce a movie called The Plot Against the President, which is based on Lee Smith's book and is available on Amazon, iTunes, and Rockfin. Tell your friends. It's about Russiagate and the fact that Russiagate was a hoax. But the reason I even talk about that is just to say that, I didn't think I would ever make movies again. I think they're extremely important. The reason I did that one is because, it was the blueprint of a lie, and it is the lie that they continue to tell us. And I know that more people watch movies than read books, and that's just the way things are now. So I thought it was important to make a piece of pop culture that would fight back against this ridiculous lie. Anyway, so all that to say, this is why people ask me things about movies, and I feel somewhat entitled to talk about them. The thing that when I thought about doing this conference and like how movies relate to nationalism, I mean, really what you've got is a very kind of basic, anybody that went to undergrad, you've got your sort of lit class, University 101, literature and thus for America, movies are the mythology of the nation, right, or of the culture. And so the stories that you tell your nation about itself are pretty impactful, and they really tell you where you're going. And they also tell other countries and other nations and other cultures about you. And so, one thing is to notice that movies are bad now. The other is to notice the incredibly potent poison that this white flag of surrender that they are to the rest of the world on behalf of not just the United States, but Western culture in general. You go from things like watching the confidence in our morality of something like The Searchers, where you've got John Wayne going up against literally a savage nation that is this, what we would call now, I believe, indigenous, that burned to death a family in the beginning. And so you've got this pro-family, these pioneers going out into the wild and having to defend themselves. And, the vengeance that drives these people from this act of violence, it's this like message of taming the West. And if you think about how much of a theme that was in American pop culture for so long, mostly because of our movies, yes, the books, the cowboy books and all that stuff too, but really when you think of Americana and the kind of movies we were exporting around the world, I always argue movies are America's most important export. This idea that we were so confident in our morality that it was like this taming of the West, this like very Christian value being brought to this sort of savage, undeveloped land that was the United States. I mean, just how awesome of a confidence that was, and to see that go from The Searchers to where we are now, which I'll get to, but I'm going to give you a hint that I had a very interesting talk with Breitbart Radio after this one movie came out, and sometimes they make articles out of my interviews, and I found that they did after this one, and the headline was, Amanda Milius says James Bond is a simp. So that's where we go from The Searchers. But anyways, in between there, I mean, I do want to kind of note that this didn't happen overnight. This is something that that devolved over time, and it seems harmless enough when it comes in. You know, obviously you've got your amazing culture. The movies themselves can be amazing. The art can be amazing that happens in the decline of a nation. I mean, it can actually be pretty good. You know, the 60s and 70s made some of the best movies, best music, but it was really, really decadent and horrific messaging. You couldn't have had worse messaging to a culture if the Nazis had designed it themselves. You know, this turning away from the family and convincing. I call this one effect, if we want to take it all the way up to the sort of 90s, I guess. I call it the Edward Scissorhands sort of anti-suburb propaganda, where there was this period of time in the 90s where it was like, the real message was, if you have a normal family that likes you and provides for you, if you are middle class, if you live in the suburbs, and you consider yourself an artist or you are unique in any way at all, your neighborhood hates you, you are an outcast, and the only thing to do is move to the cities and become a degenerate. And that was the beginning. I mean, it's really true, and it's something as harmless as Edward Scissorhands or you know, any number of these movies, like sort of this Stepford wife fear of like, oh my God, the suburbs are going to kill all of our creativity and and then we still deal with this. I mean, this is still one of the reasons why people are like, wow, like conservatives aren't artists. And you're like, yeah, because their parents won't let them go to film school or art school. I mean, I couldn't go anywhere else, so they didn't have a choice because I failed at everything else. But yeah, and they still sort of thrive on this message, whereas you can't have a good nation and be an artist and tell stories, which actually makes no sense because that's precisely what you need to do to maintain the health of your nation and culture. Anyway, so moving on from the Searchers and the Edward Scissorhands moment, really, like, the other thing, so I thought of this actually while Peter Thiel was speaking, where we're talking about the globalization, because really one of the things that's happened is we all watched movies get bad, and we know that, and I don't even care about big dumb movies. I like big dumb movies. My second favorite movie of all time is Alien, but that's an amazing piece of American art. There's nothing, there's a big difference between you know, movies being done for the lowest common denominator of the United States to make the most money, like big stupid movies have always been popular, like since Jaws. There's a difference between that and what we have in the last few years, which is they're not just big stupid movies, they're globalist filth. And the thing that really stands out about that is that, you know, before the last like 10 years, I would say, you would still have these stories about American life where American life could be critiqued, but they were sort of told against this backdrop that at the end of the day, if America was hard or America was difficult or America might not necessarily be perfectly fair to every class or every type of person, at the end of the day, there was something fundamentally good at the bottom of it and worth saving. Now, we don't even have countries really show up in these movies. Now, when the alien force comes and lands, it's not all the countries uniting together in their sort of Independence Day differences and glory to fight the aliens. It's like just UN blah, where you can't tell the difference between anybody, and it's all just awful. The homogenization is really the thing I've noticed that's really taken the American culture from bad to worse, which is that it goes from, you know, always Hollywood depends on these tentpole large movies to guide their industry, but now the industry really is not even accessible to anything else. The movie industry really only makes money on these $200 million and up movies. And when you watch them, it's not just that they're big and stupid, it's that they are literally watered down to the point where they have, and I know how they do this, they make them, the scripts have to be easily translated to as many languages as possible because they need the global audience to make that 200 million back. So in the economy of the movie industry is the globalization. And so you don't even get silly movies like, I'm trying not to be like really esoteric and arty about it, but even something as silly as like You've Got Mail. That was a movie that could have only happened in the United States at that point, simply due to the fact that it spoke to a very particular sense of isolation and you know, this creeping modern sense that had come in with the email world and all of that and how foreign that was at the time. You can't get a movie that speaks to a culturally specific moment because it won't be understood in South America, China, the rest of Asia. Like it doesn't translate. It's the reason why humor is usually smaller budget movies, because humor is very culturally specific. Anyways, all of this to say that, I don't see it getting any better. I would abandon even going to modern movies that are coming out these days. I don't really see much. It really is kind of summed up in the decadence of this horrific James Bond movie that just came out. Which, and again, what the culture is doing to you is it's the last thing I'll say about this. The whole point of it is to turn your mythology on its head. And I have my own issues with the James Bond mythology, being that I think spy propaganda is stupid, and you can just feel how heavy it is. Like, oh, the spies are so handsome and exciting, and you're like, no, they're not. They look like Stephen Halper. But anyway, so my issues with that aside, James Bond was a very specific byproduct of the 60s and 70s, of the 60s. A single man, he was ultimately masculine in his beliefs. All he had to do, he was crafty and resourceful, and he survived. And he was untouched by female values. And the whole point is there was room for that because he stood sort of aside of the normal family way of existing. Now, you're not allowed to be that guy. You're not allowed to be not tamed by the female hierarchy. There are no such thing as masculine men that are just allowed to run around and sleep with girls in Italy and then like forget their names and all of that and then save the Western civilization by defusing the bomb. Like that doesn't happen anymore. So what they had to do before they killed the character, I'm just going to tell you that I tell you what happens in the movie, but I hope none of you go see this movie. But basically, they really do. They turn him into a simp. He's somebody's baby daddy by accident, first of all. He sacrifices himself for the girl. All he wants is to just like settle down, and he cries a lot. And you're like, you've got to be kidding me. And they did that specifically. It's the same reason why they're going to make Superman gay, and everything has to be the opposite of what it was. Because they have to take your culture and turn it on its head and shame you. And the culture is so far from the searchers. It's so far from telling the world America is a good place and America brings something of value to a land that was unpopulated and had no civilization. Now the message is, we're racist, we're bad, everybody's transgender, we can't even fight a war, and just, we suck. And we're broadcasting that to the world and to ourselves, and people are listening to it, and like young people are listening to it. So it's terribly poisonous, and I'll leave you just so that you can decide, if we're on the way up or on the way down, and who might be. Which is the same week that James Bond, The Simp, came out. The #1 movie in the world was a Chinese movie celebrating a major war victory. So, I think I said in response to that like, had in the 80s they made my dad the poet laureate and like put Red Dawn in the Library of Congress, we would have been much better off. But so that just tells you, I think China isn't going to make the kinds of mistakes that we are now. Anyway.